Hello and welcome to a video review of 100 tactical patterns you must know, plus a little bonus discussion. For those of you who heard the Perpetual Chess podcast discussing the book, what we're going to do in this video is look at a few positions that you can spend as much or as little time as you want trying to solve. But first, let's welcome the host of the Chess Journeys podcast, Kevin Scull. What's up, Kevin?
How you doing? It's been a good day, and I'm ready to look at some positions.
Yeah, we're going to look at a few of our favorites as well as a few from Kevin's Chessable course. So you watching can take this as seriously or as unseriously as you want. But just to give you a sort of feel for the types of positions that are in 100 tactical patterns you must know. So let's begin with a classic. So Kevin and I both selected a handful of positions. There are a lot of really cool ones in there, as I mentioned in the podcast. And Kevin went for a classic first. So, Kevin, before we say the answer, what did you like about this here position?
What I liked about this is it seems so easy now that I've seen the pattern, but I had not categorized this as a separate pattern in my head. I think part of it is because I always castle short. It's so rare if I castle long. And when you're castling short, it is incredibly rare when you get the chance for a double attack. But sometimes when you castle long, apparently it happens enough that it's its own pattern.
Yeah, this is a classic pattern, and I actually even knew this was from a Michael Adams game when I saw this. But it's still, it's just a pleasing idea. You dream of being able to castle and win the rook at the same time. And of course, these castling patterns are ones, or when you're stumped on a puzzle, like one of those Polgar checkmate puzzles or something. Right. At some point, you always want to check to see if it's legal to castle and if there's any pawns on the 5th/4th rank for en passant. Because at some point, when you just can't come up with anything else, it's like maybe it's a castling or en passant problem. And in this one, if someone told you it's to win a rook, once you've exhausted all other possibilities, then maybe you go for this beautiful check. All right. So the first one that I chose is one. So Kevin and I in the podcast talked about the fact that this book has some really cool patterns, but it does have the habit of kind of escalating quickly in some cases. So this one is from an old Kostyuk-Karyakin game, and it's in the pin chapter, and things are set off with this crazy move queen takes a6. 1 point being, of course, that if rook takes queen, white can play rook takes rook, and the queen would be forced to block. Well, I'll just show it. Rook takes queen, rook takes rook, queen has to block, bishop takes, and now we're winning. So that's a nice, cool, fancy aspect of the tactic. It turns out that black can just move the rook, and they're only a little bit worse. But what actually happened in the game, and what gave us this cool pattern, is black takes the rook, takes, and it's the classic, it's like a plot with like a twist and a counter twist. Black thought that they saw something that white did not, but they were mistaken. So after rook takes queen, if you like, you can try even from here to pause the video and figure out whether white's winning or not and how they should continue. Well, they lost their queen, so let's hope they have something in mind. Kevin, do you recall this one?
I think, isn't it just rook c8 check, then the queen has to block, and then you take the bishop, and it's kind of just what you showed before, only a little bit different?
A little bit different, yeah. So the thing is, you see rook, it looks like, okay, rook c8, queen has to block, we're going to take the queen, and everything's good. But black has this trick. So after rook c8, they can play queen e8, which after rook takes queen, king f7, and if I were playing black, I would be like, there's no way they saw that. Now after bishop takes bishop, king takes rook. Yes, white has 2 pawns, but black is still better. These pawns are hard to mobilize because of the pressure on the a-pawn. But again, there is a plot twist and there's a counter twist, which is in this position, white has an amazing move. Do you remember now, Kevin?
Yeah, I think it is rook 8 to lure them into the double attack.
Unbelievable, yeah. So the bishop is pinned and the bishop cannot take the rook. And if the rook takes, like Kevin said, beautiful double attack. So after rook a8, it's resignable. Just an amazing tactic.
I will say before reading that, if you had just given me this, I would have never found it. But now it's like tucked away in there somewhere. Like, oh, you got this move here.
Yeah, it definitely like it stirs the creative juices for sure. And this next one, Kevin, is a classic. You know, you got to play the hits. Could you tell us about this one, Kevin?
I think this is one of my favorites and that I picked up from this book, which is he calls it the Knight Bishop collaboration. I call it the like, wow, I can't believe the knight can take one of these pawns move. And so I find this to be really interesting, the idea that you can just take one of these pawns and it looks like you're just losing a knight. But if they take with the bishop, then you just get to come back and take with the knight, and then you're just up a pawn. And this has actually come up in several of my games, and I kept missing it. And now I feel like having read this, it's been embedded. Like, no, that is a pattern you got to know. Like, that's just a thing you have to know.
Yeah, no, that one for sure. So many pawns are lost with this pattern that it was definitely well done by FM Frank Erwich to include this in the course. And this next one was also selected by Kevin. So again, you could pause your screen if you want, but Kevin's about to take us through it. So better be quick. Kevin, tell us about this one.
Yeah, the reason I picked this is because this is actually a similar pattern to something I have in my own course, which I can't remember what he calls it, but I call it the sneaky queen maneuver, where it's this idea of, you know, we all know those patterns where it's like queen comes out to h4, checks the king and double attacks. And here you just have to set it up, right? So it's like, I believe it's bishop takes knight, then they have to take you, then you take the pawn with the knight, and then when they take back with the bishop, now you get to double attack and, you know, win a pawn, and their king is now vulnerable, and things fall apart from here. So I just found it interesting that we both came upon a similar tactical motif. So I thought that was kind of.
Yeah, classic pattern for sure, and one that definitely does come up. I mean, this is probably like move 6 or something, so this is basically an opening trap. And FM Frank Erwich does a couple things that are noteworthy in the book. Number one, he has a lot of composed positions, or not a lot, but a handful, where he was trying to get at some idea, and he actually created his own position to make it super instructive. But the other thing he does is, in addition to stuff that occurred in games, which is, as a trainer, I know is easy to find because you can stumble across that stuff from running database queries, but he also has what he calls analysis positions, which is like something that could have happened from a game, but he kind of found on his own. And this one, it's black to move and win if you want to pause it. Kevin, do you remember this one? You don't have to say the answer. I'm just curious.
No, I don't remember this one. Okay, I mean, it looks like obviously it's a discover check, but I'm not seeing a cool way to execute this.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's like the dream to have the discovered check lined up, and you would think that there's got to be a way to take advantage, but the rook is guarded. Taking the bishop doesn't do any good because they can just take us. Now, you might start to look for quiet moves with this bishop to try to put white in a zugzwang, and you might look at something like bishop e5. But bishop e5 doesn't do the trick, because now the rook can move to here, and there's no way to attack it with a discovered check. Because if we go rook d3, discovered check, they can take our bishop, and if we go rook g5, we're not attacking their rook. The bishop shields it. So the only winning move is actually bishop b8. And now the rook has no place to hide. If it tries to attack the bishop horizontally, we, of course, can attack horizontally, and now we're winning the exchange. And if it tries to attack the bishop vertically, we can try to attack the bishop vertically. So this amazing quiet move, bishop to b8, is the only winning move. And again, in some cases, the names are really important, but in other cases, it's just a really cool position or a really cool pattern to be familiar with. Yeah. All right, next up, one selected by Kevin. He talked about this in the podcast we recorded, a Greek gift with a twist. Take it away, Kevin.
Yeah, this position really highlighted for me almost the problem with the book, especially if you're just trying to read it, like laying in bed. You're like, okay, I know the Greek gift. I'll take with the bishop. They'll take with the king. I'll check with the knight. They'll go back. The queen will come up and I'll mate them. But of course, the king can go to g6. And then there's there's like 15 moves from here until mate.
Right.
And as I'm reading this in my bed, I'm like, what? How am I supposed to keep up with this?
Yeah, it gets pretty complicated pretty quickly. You've always got to decide between Queen D3 and Queen G4 ideas in the Greek gift. And yeah, he definitely gives it a bit of a new treatment. Yeah, not just the classic boom, boom, and it's over. And just to run through the solution, we won't go through too many details. You can find that in the book or course, but takes, knight check, Queen D3. Now we play Queen G3, setting up a discovered check. Queen moves, and then the devastating knight to E2 with the knight coming to F4 is the killer blow. Now the queen has access to the king. Yeah, and it's like made in 50, basically.
Right. Imagine reading this in bed, and you're like, wait, I just have all my pieces now? What is happening?
Yeah, exactly. But you did get the win, Kevin. Congratulations. Okay. And this next one was one that I really liked. It's actually from a game by his fellow new in chess author, Thomas Wilhelms. And it looks like, in this position, and it looks like black, of course, should play queen takes pawn check. But it turns out that black has something better. So you can pause your video if you want and try to figure out what black should do, because queen takes pawn check actually doesn't cut it. Kevin, putting you on the spot again. Do you remember this one?
No, I do not.
This one is the crazy kamikaze queen. Queen takes pawn check again, doesn't lead to much. After king f1, we can give one more check, but we are down in exchange, and the king is kind of slinking away. But we have the amazing resource, queen takes rook, the kamikaze queen chapter. And now the idea, of course, is we're threatening back rank mate with queen takes rook, but if they take, now we can give up our bishop, take, and emerge in this winning endgame. Yeah. So, yeah, that one I really liked as well. And that actually happened in the game, if I recall correctly. And then to finish up, we have a couple positions from Kevin's course. And this one, Kevin, I was a little confused when you sent it to me, because it really could be from 100 Tactical Patterns You Must Know, but it's not, is it?
Yeah, so this position comes from my course, and I have named this one David versus Goliath. I mean, it's a basic pawn fork, but it's not sitting right in front of us. We have to make it happen first. And so we can see, by taking the bishop with the knight, the pawn takes, and then we get to thrust our pawn forward. And the reason I named it David versus Goliath is because it feels like, if you know that historical story at all, this is David wading into battle and defeating his foes. And much like in that story, when the opponent loses their hero, either their knight or their queen, their army is in disarray and they swiftly lose the battle. And that's what happens to your opponent, right? If you hit them with a pawn fork, they lose. I got hit with a pawn fork in move 6 of one of my games in Vegas, Ben, in round 1. It devastated my whole tournament, right? Because the whole rest of the tournament, I was like, what? How did I lose that game? So a pawn fork can be a devastating moment.
It was a slingshot to the eye in David and Goliath, right?
Slingshot to the forehead, I believe.
Ah, okay. Slingshot to the forehead. But yeah, this pawn fork definitely could fit the bill. And then last but not least, we have another one from Kevin's course. Take it away, Kevin.
Yeah, so this comes from the notion of something I call stack 'em and crack 'em, which is you stack two pieces together and then you crack them. And the name comes from something that we talk a lot about on Chess Journeys, which is this problem that adults have, is they love to buy new chess books and they crack them open and then they read like one sentence and they stack them and they're like, look, I have 30 books. I'm good at chess now. So I thought it was a fun way to tap into that idea. And so here we can see that right now this queen and the king are on the same file. They're ready to be cracked, but we need to open it up so we can move this knight over. We can check when they take with the pawn. If they don't take with the pawn, they're mated. So when they take with the pawn, we can move that rook over. We have stacked the pieces. Now we can crack them open, and we're going to win the game now.
Yeah, and the key dynamic, the tricky thing, of course, is to notice that the bishop actually guards the g8 square.
Yes,
but yes,
exactly.
A very nice tactic. And I love the stack 'em and crack 'em analogy. Of course, some of us don't even crack the books that we purchase. We just stack them. So at least if you crack them, you've got one leg up in some cases.
You got to crack them before you stack them, Ben.
So that about wraps things up. In summary, a lot of good exercises in 100 Tactical Patterns You Must Know. And of course, Kevin's course has some great stuff as well. And it fits well because, as we talked about in the podcast, this course, while it has some great patterns, is not for the faint of heart. It's pretty challenging. And Kevin, yours is at a slightly easier level, correct?
Yeah, it's at, I'd say, like 800 to 1400. In many ways, it's kind of preparing you for this book. In fact, when I saw this book, mine had just finished, and I was like, "Oh no, is my course totally irrelevant?" And then as I was reading through it, I was like, "Oh no, this is actually a good precursor. They kind of complement each other well."
Yeah. Okay. Sounds good. Yeah. And I agree. I mean, these puzzles, while they're cool, as we talked about in the pod, some of the puzzles in 100 Tactical Patterns get quite complex. And that one, as we said in the recording, 1500 on up, something like that, 1400, somewhere in that range. So until you get there, you can check out Kevin Scull's course on Chessable.
All right, thanks for having me, everybody.